What is up, TFA fam? Hope you are all doing well. Hope everything is going good for you and yours. We are here to hit you with the Week 8 buy or sell pod and video. We realized that this is something that we were lacking in our content arsenal. So we're going to be hitting you guys with this for the rest of the year. This will come out on Wednesdays, and then we will have the Wednesday live pod where we go over start, sit, waiver, trade, all of your questions, and we'll get into that. So with that out of the way, before we jump into it, please be sure to subscribe, rate, review, however you're consuming this content goodness, this greatness that's about to come through your ear holes, through the eyes, however you're doing it. Please do that for us. It really means a lot, and we appreciate all the support that we've gotten thus far. Kev, why don't you go ahead, man, and start us off. Tell the folks who your first buy is for Week 8.
Yeah, I think one of them is one we've kind of been talking about for a while, and that's Carson Wentz. He had a really rough start to the season, and over his first 2 weeks, he was a borderline QB2. Gets watched in, and then he also played LA. But then since then, he's kind of bounced back. I mean, he's scored at least 20 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. One against Pittsburgh where he scored 17.4. But other than that, he scored, at least 20.4 fantasy points in each of his last 4 games. And then, you look at the schedule, he has the second easy schedule remaining for quarterbacks. And we're getting to the point now where you should probably start looking at playoff schedules and seeing if there's something you can do to improve. If a guy has a terrible matchup, maybe you look to move him. There's certain guys you're not really going to be worried about that with, but those are like your elite plays. But other than that, yeah, I think that's somebody like Carson Wentz you should be looking to buy. And I don't think people are fully invested or bought in to Carson Wentz at this point. So I think you could probably still get him at, the only thing I'll say is I don't particularly love buying a quarterback just because I feel like there's waiver options out there. But, if guys like Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert are off the board, and if you're really wanting a quarterback and whatever guy you have is struggling a little bit, I think Carson Wentz is the way to go. Because if you look at their playoff schedule, you get New Orleans, Arizona, and Dallas the last 3 weeks of the season as well for the fantasy playoffs. You can't ask much better than that. They're getting guys like Dallas Goedert. Jalen Reagor was activated from IR, so he should be back within the next 3 weeks. They have to activate him within the next 3 weeks. So they're getting their weapons back here as well. And he's been doing this, which is the most impressive, with Travis fucking Fulgham, who nobody knew about heading into the season. No Dallas Goedert. I mean, all these weapons, they've missed so many pieces. Their offensive line's been banged up, and he's continued to produce. So, all the haters out there can suck it. So if you're looking at quarterback, that's where I would go. The other positions I have, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. We've talked about, I believe, Nick Chubb. I feel like we've talked about him every damn week. I've mentioned him the last 2 or 3 weeks to buy him. And now Kevin Stefanski said he's not going to be available for this week, but he is right on track to return week 10. They go on bye week 9. So this is really the last week, after this week, and then you head into week 9, they're on bye. So this is really kind of the last opportunity I think you're going to have to buy him. And I think you can still buy him for pretty cheap, because if you have an owner who has them, let's say they're 3-4, 3-4, somewhere in that range, 4-3, maybe they're kind of on that borderline of making the playoffs, and they own them. I think if you're a team that is 5-2, 6-1, and you're looking to make an upgrade, I think that's a perfect person to attack and try to get Nick Chubb off of them. Give them somebody that's usable. And if you're 6-1, if you have a James Robinson or something like that, who I think is still, as much as opportunity he gets, I still think there's going to be some up and downs with James Robinson. I'm not necessarily selling James Robinson, but if I can acquire somebody like Nick Chubb, who's going to be a top 5 back when he returns, I'm going to do that. Nick Chubb is certainly one of them. Another one is Jonathan Taylor for me. If you look at Jonathan Taylor, I think he's also another name that you can really look at. He hasn't blown your socks off, especially after once Marlon Mack went down, we kind of expected more, but he's 20th in fantasy points per game. He's 15th in carries. The team's not running as much as you'd like to see, but he's still getting all the opportunities in terms of the carries. I like to see a little more goal line work for him, but they have the remaining schedule is where I want to buy him, because he has the easiest remaining schedule for running backs the rest of the season. So I do like Jonathan Taylor. I don't think it's going to take a ton to be able to acquire him. I don't think people, especially in your standard redraft leagues, not obviously in Dynasty, it's a different conversation, but in just your standard seasonal leagues this year, I think people are probably a little upset with him. He hasn't really given you the numbers you were really probably hoping for, especially once Marlon Mack went out. Because once Marlon Mack went out, people were thinking this guy was going to be a lock for a top 5 running back, top 10 running back, but it just hasn't happened, especially behind that elite offensive line. But he's still giving you good enough numbers. And I think with this remaining schedule, I think you can really kind of expect things to look up. The bye's out of the way. So I think it's still a good buying opportunity for him. And then moving on to wide receivers, there's a few guys here that I really do like. I'm going to start with Allen Robinson. Listen, Allen Robinson, so far, I mean, he's been good. He hasn't been great, right? Right now he's 22nd in fantasy points per game, 15.8. He's coming off one of his worst games of the season with 11 fantasy points, 4 for 70. The week before that, he was wide receiver 38 with 10.3 fantasy points. But these were also, the Carolina matchup, you probably expected a little bit more, but that was, but other than that, the LA matchup was not certainly easy. Tampa Bay, he still went 10 for 90, which is, encouraging against that defense. So we've seen some positives, but the really positive for me and why I want to buy Allen Robinson is because he's third in the league in targets. The guy's getting targeted. He owns a 25% target share. Before this week, he was actually at almost 30% target share, but because he only received 4 targets, he did leave late in the game against the Rams last night. But regardless of that, I think he's still fine. But I mean, he's 7th in routes run. He's 3rd in targets. He's 4th in air yards, like 6th in deep targets. Like all the metrics are there. He's going to be fine. And the remaining schedule is really not that scary for him either. So I think we've kind of gotten past some of the tougher matchups they have, and things are going to start to look up for Allen Robinson. I don't think he's going to be – I would be surprised if he were to miss this week. I don't think it sounded like very serious. As soon as he got up, he started jawing at the ref for telling him that he had to leave the game. I think it was so far late in the game, they made the late mistake, and then after that, there was no real reason to put him back in the game at that point. So I feel like that has more to do with anything. But I absolutely love buying Allen Robinson. A few more really quickly. Keenan Allen, listen – you're probably paying a little high on him, but to be honest with you, right now he's 14th in fantasy points per game. But again, he's 6th in targets. And since Justin Herbert's been here, the dude's been an absolute baller. These are the guys I'm looking for. I'm looking for these high target share guys. He's averaging 30% of the targets 30% of the targets among this offense, which is 4th in the league. Listen, the guy is just going to continue to get peppered with targets, and that's why I absolutely love him. So if you can acquire him, I don't think it's going to take as much as people would think he is. Like, he has wide receiver 1 upside, but people are willing to part with him for less because people just don't look at him that way, right? Especially, in PPR formats, people like him, but they're not in love with Keenan Allen, and I think he could be had at a pretty good price. So if you can get Keenan Allen, he's somebody that I definitely want. He's 7th in receptions, 15th in receiving yards. He does only have 2 touchdowns, so there should be some positive regression coming there, but he is 5th in the league with yards after the catch as well. So there's a lot to like on Keenan Allen's resume right now. And so between him and Allen Robinson, those are the 2 high-volume guys that I really want to acquire. And then the last one, Sterling Shepard, he just came back, but there's a lot to like with Sterling Shepard. He's averaging at least 6 targets per game with Daniel Jones. He came back, had a pretty decent game last week. He's going to take absolutely nothing to acquire. I'm not expecting huge performances from him, but I think he's somebody that can be a weekly contributor that's going to give you some decent fantasy points. And then the last one for me is Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is all over the place, and I don't think it's going to be tough, a little bit tougher to acquire him because of the state of the tight end position. But I do think that Mark Andrews is somebody that you can probably look at to acquire. He is very boom or bust so far this year, but I like his schedule moving forward. He's got a few more tough weeks, but boy, when you get into those fantasy playoffs for Mark Andrews, it is wheels up. They have a fantastic matchup the last 3 weeks of the season as well. So I do like buying there on Mark Andrews. So that's my list of the buying opportunities of guys for this week.
One of my buys for this week, you already talked about his quarterback. I'm going to bring up Jalen Reagor. Now, you can get this guy, obviously, in redraft leagues. You can pick him up off the waivers. I just went and looked at ESPN and Yahoo leagues, and he is rostered in less than 15% on both of those sites. He was activated off the IR, like Kevin mentioned. He has a chance to play this week. He's ahead of schedule, but if it's not this week, it's going to be soon. Kev already mentioned the matchups and the schedule they have coming the rest of the way. I think, according to Sharp Football Stats, rather, they have the 5th easiest pass defense schedule going forward for the rest of the year. So, I mean, Fulgham is on the outside. Obviously, Ward is in the slot. He's been disappointing after we had heard that he was the Zach Ertz of the wide receiver group. He only has, I think, 1 game of more than 50 yards. Fulgham's on the outside. Ward's on the inside, and Reagor is their chess piece. He can play in or out. Now, they didn't move him around too much while he was active those first couple of weeks. but he can absolutely do it. There were the reports coming out of training camp that that's what they were doing, is they were moving him around. And obviously his athleticism brings a much needed aspect to that offense. I mean, the rest of the season, they're looking at the Cowboys, Giants, Browns, Seahawks, Packers, Saints, Cardinals, and then Cowboys again to finish out the fantasy year for you. So it's wheels up for Reagor, and I think it's not going to take him a lot to get reacclimated into this offense, and I don't think it's going to be I think they're just going to throw him in right into the fire because they absolutely need him with all the injuries they have going on there in Philadelphia. Another receiver that I am buying, kind of the same thing that Kevin was touching on with Keenan Allen, and that is Jarvis Landry, another guy who just doesn't get the respect that he probably deserves for what he has done for a lot of fantasy teams. But obviously the news coming out that Odell suffered the ACL injury. He's obviously going to be out for the year. Landry should be getting fed targets coming up with this. In his first year with Cleveland, obviously that was without Odell. Landry saw fewer than 7 targets only 3 times, and that was actually the same with Odell in 2019. I think in 2018 he had 7 games over with double-digit targets, and then in 2019 it was 6 or 7. It was relatively close. Obviously, it's a little bit of a different offense. They want to be a run-first offense. But with as much as they've been playing from behind, if they can't get out to that lead and then control it with their run game, they're going to have no other option. Landry's going to be the main guy there. Hooper's been out. David Njoku has been a little bit of a disappointment. The other tight end they have is a rookie, so I'm not looking at him and making a huge impact. So Jarvis Landry is another one, like I said, kind of the same way with Keenan Allen, where you're not going to have to pay for the kind of production they give you. Then my last one I'm going to throw out here is David Johnson, and this is strictly an opportunity-based buy. He is second in routes run, second in snap share among running backs, 5th in opportunity share among running backs. Currently a mid RB2. I think he's at RB16 in PPR leagues, and he hasn't had like one of those big blow-up games. So again, kind of with all these other guys too, his cost might not equal what his production actually is. And with all the injuries that we've been hit with at running back so far, whether they're season long or for several weeks of the season, being able to plug in somebody who's going to get you 12 to 15 to 16 points per week in that RB2 spot is a really nice luxury to have. And then just an honorable mention, somebody that we've been talking about since the offseason, and that is Chase Edmonds. Obviously, with Kenyon Drake going down, he's going to miss a couple of weeks with that ankle injury. Edmonds, I think, is somebody that you can go out because the same way he had that one bigger game, but he hasn't had like the massive, 90 yards on the ground, another 50 yards through the air, anything like that. So I think he's somebody who you can go out and target relatively cheaply.
Yeah, and I think the positive with him too that people should be looking at is what we saw last year is once running back like Kenyon Drake took over that backfield, like he ran with it, like they didn't move away from him. So I think if he can really produce in these opportunities, he's going to get at least 2 starts of being the every down back. If not more. I mean, I could see 2 or 3. They do have the bye this week, but if he really produces well, I think you could be looking at him being the starting running back for the rest of the season. So, we've talked about this before prior to this. So I do like Chase Edmonds. If I was going to acquire him, I would wait until after this week where some of the buzz dies off with him, because that's kind of because they are on bye this week. So you try to wait till early next week where some of that's died down, because right now it's kind of like Chase Edmonds hype season right now. But for good reason. But anyways, so I do like that call as well. The other one I forgot to mention it would be just Josh Jacobs. I also think he's somebody that you can acquire relatively cheap. He's kind of struggled a little bit. We know how much involved he's into this backfield as well. So, and their schedule opens up a little bit for running backs, especially over the last couple of weeks of the season. So I do like Josh Jacobs as well.
Yeah, I think the thing to keep in mind is depending on where your team is sitting is going after guys who have disappointed that you might be able to snag on the cheap, that you're not going to have to give up your best assets in order to acquire. So that's definitely something to look at.
Yeah, so a lot of all this depends on is exactly that, right? So one, if you are a 6-1 team, 5-2 team, don't rest on your laurels here and be like, oh, well, I'm good. I can just keep chilling. Like, you should always be looking to get better. Now, on the same token, if you are a 2-5, 3-4 type team, you should be a little bit more aggressive because you are really hanging on by a thread of actually making the playoffs. There's still time for you to make the playoffs. You know, I've told this story before, but a couple of years ago, I started out 2-5 in a league, went undefeated the rest of the way, made the playoffs, and made the championship. Like it's possible for you. So don't just give up and think that it's over. You just got to get a little bit more aggressive. Start basically, if it's me, I'm starting guys that just have really high ceilings, stuff like that on a weekly basis. You know, there's been so many injuries this year. It's likely not caused by you, but see what you can do. You know, a Nick Chubb would be a good guy. Maybe you try to trade him and see what you can get for him. You know, sell guys like that for something because you have to win now. You cannot wait for these guys to come back at this point. So even if you may take the loss in terms of the value that the guy thinks that he's getting from you, like it's okay to do that. And always jump into our comments and we'll help you out any way you can. I'll tell you some guys maybe you should target. You send us your roster. We'll look at it. We'll kind of help you out. So that's what we're here for.
This is a podcast for the people, by the people. Let's jump into our sells. We'll crank this out. We're trying to keep these shorter episodes for you guys to be able to, listen to during commutes and whatnot. So my two sells for week 8, Mike Davis and Tyler Lockett. Now, whenever Kev saw this, he brought up good points about, McCaffrey's coming back and, what are you really going to get for him? I do think there is a sliver of hope, particularly if you have Mike Davis and you don't also have McCaffrey. Like you're going to want to target the McCaffrey owner, obviously. Like this is kind of like a very specific trade. But Davis currently sits as the PPR RB7 on the year, right? McCaffrey's coming back. He might have a chance to play this week. If not this week, next week for sure. Or whenever their next game is. I can't remember when their bye is. But the reason why I think you can still get a decent return on him is, one, because of how he's performed with McCaffrey out. 2, coach speak, I know, but head coach Matt Rule did say that Mike Davis is still going to be involved even whenever McCaffrey comes back. But that really makes sense for them to do so because of that absurd, crazy contract they just gave McCaffrey. Like, well-deserved, don't get me wrong, but you're not going to want to run somebody like McCaffrey into the ground, particularly after they just came off of that injury. So I do think that there is a legitimate chance that Mike Davis could be involved, and even he might even be able to provide some flex value on a week-to-week basis, even whenever McCaffrey is back. So I do think that there is a glimmer of hope to be able to sell him. You should have sold him a week or two ago, but if you still have him, target that McCaffrey owner, or if there's somebody who's just in dire strait at the running back position, see if you can flip him for that. Now, Tyler Lockett, this is as sell high gets, right? This isn't I think he's going to fall off after this, or DK is going to come back and just completely ball out and explode and take over everything. I think Lockett is still going to have his weeks going forward, but everyone just watched him absolutely ball out this past, the line that he has is something that you only see on college games whenever Alabama takes on Holy Mary, Mother of Trinity. You know what I mean? 15 for 203 is just absolutely absurd. And if you actually combine that performance with his week 3 game against Dallas, where he went 9 for 100 and another 3, those 2 games alone make up 64% of his fantasy points up to this date. Now, again, I'm not saying he's just going to fall off the face of the earth, but this is absolutely worth floating out there and just see if you can get somebody to overpay for Tyler Lockett and just to take advantage of that island game that everybody was watching, everybody was talking about afterward. See if you can get someone to overpay for him. I wouldn't necessarily be interested in making a fair trade with Tyler Lockett, but see if you can get somebody to overpay.
Yeah, but that'd be one of those situations if you are a guy that's kind of hanging on 3 and 4, and you probably get a lot of back in return for that. So for me, it is pretty simple. I have 3 names, and they're all kind of similar to the reasons why I have them on this list. The first one is Christian Kirk. Listen, Christian Kirk, I love Christian Kirk, the player, but as of right now, it's tough to really trust him because of his production, right? Now, the last 2 weeks, he scored at least 20 fantasy points in each of his last 2 games. He scored 22.6 week 6 against Dallas, and then another 20.7 against Seattle. The problem is he's just not seeing a ton of targets. He did see 8 targets this past week, but that's the most he's seen all season. Prior to that, it's 3, 7, 5, 4, 5. He's just not getting a lot of targets, and he's not really doing a ton with them. I mean, last week he had 5 receptions, which is tied again for the most receptions he's had all year. He's just finding the end zone. He has 4 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks, and then he has 5 over the last 4 weeks. So I don't like guys like this because they're going to be so hard to predict. Like, unless he's all of a sudden going to get a much larger target share. But right now, he's 51st in the league in targets, 57th in target share. He's even 36th in fantasy points per game, 65th in the receptions, 54th in receiving yards, but he's 7th in touchdowns. So that tells you where his production is coming from, and that's just not sustainable. So I love Christian Kirk, but this is the ultimate sell high opportunity right now for a guy who's 34th in the league in routes run. So, like, if he's not going to see this like a ton of volume, I just don't think you can trust him on a week-to-week basis. And this is the best buying opportunity you're going to have, coming off 2 strong performances in a row. So if you can move Christian Kirk, move Christian Kirk. Now, the next one for me is Todd Gurley. Here's my issues with him. One is their schedule. They do not have an easy schedule the rest of the way. As of right now this week against Carolina, that is a good matchup. The Carolina is really bad against the run. But after that, it's Denver, bye week, the Saints, the Raiders, which is another good matchup, the Saints, the Chargers, not a good matchup, Tampa Bay, the worst matchup you possibly could ask for. And Tampa Bay and Chargers are playoff week. And then you finally, if you somehow make it, then you get the Chiefs week 16, in the Super Bowl, right? So for me, like, it's just way too many really bad matchups. All he's really being utilized as right now is a runner. He's 2nd in the league in carries, but he's 26th in targets. He only has 20 targets on the year. He's just not being utilized as a pass catcher right now. If he's not being utilized as a pass catcher, I can't trust him. He's 14th in the league in fantasy points per game. I think this is a great buying opportunity to sell Todd Gurley. So if you can sell Todd Gurley right now, I'm all about that life, especially with that upcoming schedule. Last but not least, it's DJ Moore. I fucking love DJ. I did a video this offseason about DJ Moore that we did a debate on, right? DJ Moore and Amari Cooper. But it's tough right now for me with him because he's just not seeing the targets. Since week 2, he has 1 game where he has double-digit targets. He has 4, 6, 5, 11 week 6, and then 5 last week. He is winning 4 receptions for 93 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is very similar to what we just saw. And this is his best performance he's had all year against New Orleans. And they're still going to have to throw the ball, but they just continue to pepper Robbie Anderson with targets. So it's tough for me to trust DJ Moore on a week-to-week basis. Again, it's kind of the same situation I just talked about. Now, he is obviously, DJ Moore's in a better spot. He's still 13th in the league in targets, 14th in routes run, but he's kind of capped right now with his target share. So he has seeing 23% of the targets in his backfield. But I do wonder how this is going to affect him as well once Christian McCaffrey comes back, who's also going to be heavily involved as a pass catcher. So I'm not saying you have to run out and do whatever you can to try to move DJ Moore. He's probably the one that I feel like the least but with this buying opportunity, with his monster game he's just coming off of, he has another great matchup again this week against the Falcons on Thursday Night Football. If he balls out again, to me, I feel like this could be a really good opportunity to sell high because as of right now, I just think that it's a tough one to really trust. So that's why I have DJ Moore there. I love the player. I think he's still going to have some boom weeks, but past that, I think you're going to be very boom or bust with him, and that's something that I just don't want to deal with on a week-to-week basis.
So let us know. Drop a comment if you were watching on the YouTube channel. Let us know who you were trying to buy or sell this week. You can hit us up on social media as well. You can find Kev on Twitter at FantasyRat13. You can find myself on Twitter at CKutzerFF, and you can find the TFA account, and that is at FF_authority. Jump in the DMs, hit us up, engage with us. We love talking to all you guys. And like I said, Wednesday night, 9:30, 9:45-ish, we will be going live. Kev has a guest lined up, and we will be going over the Week 8 start and sit. And then Thursday will be the DFS pod. So a lot of content coming to you guys in the next couple of, the next 48 hours, basically, by the time you listen to this. So keep it tuned in here, and we will talk to you guys later.